Hello, world history students. Today's lecture is U3P4. This is the last part of Unit 3. This is a lecture on classical China or the Han Dynasty. I'm really kind of excited about this lecture. For me, China starts really during the Han Dynasty. This is when a number of things are happening that um, really continue on beyond this period of time and create the Chinese Empire that we know over time. The first of the leaders or the emperors of the Han Dynasty who we need to acquaint ourselves with is a guy by the name of Liu Bang. And Liu Bang was a general who was fighting in the civil wars after the Qin Dynasty fell. And eventually he's able to end the civil wars by conquering all of the other sides and creating this Han Dynasty. Now, he wanted to continue with the centralized rule that we had seen under the Qin dynasty, but he wants to move away from legalism, or he did move away from legalism, and started to infuse Confucian principles into government. Remember, with Confucianism, the ruler is supposed to be kind, and the ruled are supposed to be respectful and loyal to the emperor. And so, one way that he got some of these people in China to like him, to be respectful, to be loyal to him, is by lowering taxes. For example, the Qin dynasty had very high taxes on the farmers in China. Another thing that he was doing is softening the harsh punishments of legalism. He had, of course, a civil service or a number of bureaucrats or government workers, but instead of punishing people terribly for small infractions of whatever they were doing, he was trying to make people happy by having these civil servants who were really quite effective and good. They were Confucianists, as we've studied, and we'll talk about that in just a second. So all of these things make him really quite popular, and he's able to centralize in a similar way that Shi Huangdi did, but not through fear, but through popularity and through respect. Continuing on, we have a guy by the name of Han Wudi, who is known as the martial emperor. And martial means kind of warlike or successful in battle. He is considered to be the greatest Han emperor, and you can see he rules for an extraordinarily long period of time. And he's able to, during this period of time, expand the empire to its greatest height through war. Now, he takes on people who live to the north and the west of China called the Xiongnu. And these are people who were nomadic warriors, sometimes raiding into China. Sometimes the Chinese would try to pay them off or bribe them by giving them things, but these Xiongnu would take that, and then they would continue to raid, and they continued to attack China. This is part of the reason that the Great Wall is built, to keep these people from the north and the west out. And so he's able to beat up on them, and he's able to settle some people in their lands, and that keeps them under pretty good control for a long period of time. Like I said, he uses Confucian bureaucracy to govern his very large area. Instead of legalism, using Confucianism, the people who were working for him were highly educated in all of Confucius's writings and what he had said, and they try to be very kind and respectful and efficient and do their best for the people. And the people then are generally pretty good to those bureaucrats as well. Han Wudi set up not just a whole bunch of these civil service jobs to help him rule his empire, but even set up an imperial university or a college or a school where people could go and learn all about Confucianism. And then if they wanted to work for the government, they would have to take a test in Confucianism. And if they passed that test, they could get a job. This meant that the bureaucrats were really well educated and, going along with Confucianist principles of being kind and respectful and very diligent. Here you can see Han Wudi's expansion. On the left, we have the Qin dynasty. You can see the Great Wall there. And then if you compare it to what we see on the right with the Han Empire, you can see that the Han have expanded into the north and to the west. They've expanded the wall a little bit as well. They expand beyond the wall up to the north and the east and take over what is today Korea or parts of Korea. And then they're expanding in the south too. So I think all of this proves that that Han Wudi is a martial emperor. He is very successful as a military ruler, not just beating up on the Xiongnu, but also conquering other lands to different directions or in different directions. The Han economy is or was really quite successful. It had an increasingly large population, and the farmers were growing more and more agricultural produce. This is part of the reason why the population expands. If there's more to eat, generally people feel pretty good about having more kids. And because farmers created what people needed to live, they were really highly honored in the Han economy or in the Han culture, more so, as you'll see in just a minute, than traders. Even though traders and merchants and artisans and so on are really quite important for the economy, they create products and they're able to make more money in kind of a dynamic way. The one product that is really quite lucrative is silk. And silk is a cloth that gets made. It's actually made out of silkworm web. And so, imagine that this is kind of like worm spit that gets processed in a certain way and is able to be used as a very, very lucrative kind of trade good. The way that silk is produced was a closely guarded secret, and it stayed with the Chinese for a long period of time and was able to make them a lot of money because they started to trade silk with people around the world, and the Silk Road emerged at this period of time. Remember, before we had roads just in general, but the Silk Road, or Silk Roads really, are a series of roads going east to west as far as Rome and as far as the Chinese capital. Now, they're able to take products like silk and spices and so on, and send them to the west, and things from the west go back to the east. And this is really something that improves everybody's economy along the Silk Road. Han society is based on filial piety, and it's got a very strict Confucian social structure. The emperor, of course, is at the top. You can see then that we have kings and governors right below him, and the emperor is the one who is choosing those people. The state officials, these Confucian state officials, are becoming educated and they're getting these jobs with the government. In addition, there were nobles and scholars. And then there's the great mass of the population, the peasants. The peasants, as I said, were highly respected as the people who created what others or what everyone needed to live. And then the artisans and merchants were beneath them. Usually, in pretty much every other place that we've studied, artisans and merchants are above the peasants or above the farmers because, as I said, it's just a more dynamic way of making money. The women in Chinese society are usually, as we've seen with most societies, second-class people. This is a very patriarchal system. They're supposed to be devoted to their families. There's that whole idea of Confucianist respect and devotion, and men above women. But women were really key to society, not just for producing children, but also for working alongside their husbands in the fields and so on. Some upper-class women were more politically involved. In fact, there was the mother of an emperor who was able to seize power when people supported her, and she ruled instead of her son for a while. Finally, people got sick of that, and in fact, she and other members of, after she died, other members of her family were murdered so that the right people came back into in charge again. The government encouraged assimilation of conquered people, and they were conquering a lot of people with Han Wudi, for example, taking over all those territories. Han Wudi wanted his Chinese people to marry the people that they had conquered and teach them their version of the language, and quite a bit of cultural diffusion spread in that way. There were also, by the way, slaves in Han society, and those were people who were conquered oftentimes as well. Maybe people like the Xiongnu could be used as slaves. In terms of technology, the Han had some really important things besides, silk improving or becoming a major trade product. They continued to build roads. They continued to build those defensive walls to keep people from invading the Han Empire. They even introduced paper in 105 CE, and that's a pretty big deal if you think about it. Being able to use Chinese characters and write on paper, which is a much more flexible way and cheaper way than carving things in stone or using clay tablets like we saw in Mesopotamia. And the Chinese language spreads as a common written language as the Han take over different places. Another couple, 2, 3 inventions were the horse collar that can pull a plow, which was being improved too. That helps out with agriculture, and the wheelbarrow, which is something pretty simple, but it's a simple way of transporting things. The wheelbarrow was invented around this period of time as well. Well, with all of these wars being fought, and a bureaucracy that was trying to collect taxes, even if they're being efficient and nice and everything. Wars cost a lot of money, and so taxes had to be raised. One of the problems that was going on at this period of time is that noble people, very rich people, large landowners never got taxed. That's kind of a thing that happens throughout history is really rich people and the aristocrats just don't get taxed by the state. And so they are competing with these smaller farmers. Well, the smaller farmers, they would have a number of children and they would divide up every generation, they'd divide up their farmlands among their children. And so families' plots of lands kept getting smaller and smaller. Eventually, those smaller farmers would no longer have enough land to farm, and they would sell their land to the larger landowners, to the nobles, who didn't have to pay taxes. So over time, the government is getting less and less tax revenue from the same amount of land because that land is going into the hand of the rich people who don't have to pay taxes. So that's a huge problem. There was I guess you could say that the rich were getting richer and the poor were getting poorer. There was a guy who came along named Wang Mang who attempted some land reform. He wanted to take from the larger landowners and give to the poor landowners. But of course, you can imagine that the rich people didn't like that very much. And eventually Wang Mang was assassinated. Internal power struggles over time caused political instability as one emperor followed the next emperor in short measure. Sometimes those emperors were just little children and other people were ruling for them, and this didn't really make for great stability. In the end, those land distribution problems caused peasant rebellions. You have a whole bunch of people who have very small plots of land. They're very poor people. They're angry at the very rich people. They're angry at the state for taxing them so much. And there was this thing called the Yellow Turban Uprising, which was really just a bunch of peasants rising up and trying to overthrow the Han Dynasty and overthrow the local nobles. At the same time, epidemics broke out. There was some flooding of rivers and so on. And the Xiongnu started to invade once again when they sensed that the Han Empire had become weakened. So there's a whole bunch of different things going on at this period of time that breaks apart the Han Dynasty. One would say from Chinese history that they had lost the mandate of heaven and the entire empire falls apart into small regional kingdoms. And we'll have to wait once again for another dynasty to come along, some other dynasty to put it all back together again, centralize it again, using the kinds of things that we've already seen happen when you have an emperor and an empire. I hope that you got everything that you needed for your EQs today. Please take the lecture check and have a nice day. Bye-bye.